This is another episode of Design Your Dream Home with Doug and Steve. And now the architects, Doug Patt and Stephen Chung.
You are watching or listening to the Design Your Dream Home with Doug and Steve. I am Steve, that is Doug. Good morning, Doug.
Morning, Stephen. How are you today?
I'm fantastic. Actually, I'm not fantastic because I stayed up very late watching World Series, and I'm a little tired today.
How late did that go?
Didn't go as late as the previous games, but it's people are celebrating. You kind of sort of watch that, and it's kind of neat.
Sucked in, and then throw stuff at the TV, and
so I'm a little tired. What architects are used to? We're used to being tired and having our coffee.
Yes, indeed. We're architects.
So, Doug, we talked about this topic, three objects, I believe, around our home.
Yes.
And for the first time, I did not understand what you were proposing. And for those of you who wonder, we don't really talk beforehand. We don't try to sort of plan these things out so that it feels scripted. We want to just kind of talk freely and get our real responses. And when Doug talked about the three everyday objects, three objects in our home, I really did pick three cool design objects, for my home that I use, that I like. It's interesting. That's not at all what Doug was sort of talking about. And I wondered, because we're not really product reviewers, but it was interesting to see the objects that I picked and noted that they all, besides being black, it's just me, right? Just they all have the same kind of gadget, they're kind of neat new technologies. They're simple, they're kind of simply designed, and they all kind of do one thing very well, which I really like. And so maybe there's another time we'll get into that. But in any case, we're not product reviewers, and nevertheless, I think it's interesting to see what sort of an architect likes in terms of, this is a pocket radar gun. It just measures the speed of a baseball. I mean, it's very accurate. It uses Doppler radar. It's a pretty cool technology. I love these kind of things. So, in any case, another time. Okay, so we're going to talk about three design elements in our homes that we find interesting, innovative, unique.
Yeah, in any home, homes that we've worked on, and it would be like a design element or a design object of some sort, and we'll show images on the screen of what we're talking about. So,
okay, so this is really about things that Doug and I find kind of cool. They're not always the most complicated or involved. I think some of them are, for me, some of them are sort of smaller, but I just sort of like them because. All right, so Doug, why don't you go first, because this was your topic and you've got great ideas.
Yeah, man. So the first tip I have is get rid of your TV cables, because it's actually possible. So, I happen to be an architect, but this is something that I have not done in my own home to my own detriment. In some respects, I've got a television set, and we altered some millwork in order to get the TV to fit in there, and it happened to fit perfectly. And so you can pull this thing out. It's got an arm, a swivel arm in the thing, but we've got tons of cables behind it, and wonderfully enough, they end up running through the millwork, and so you really don't see any of those. But I was at Home Depot the other day, and I was taking a look at how in the heck I could get rid of the cables behind my flat screen TV. So first, let me say that when we work with clients, one of the biggest challenges is, where the heck do you put your flat screen TV? And a lot of people retrofit their homes, and they've got fireplaces, which are always the center of attention in your family room. And so they put the TV up above the fireplace. And that is, for two reasons, an awful place to put your TV. Number one, looking up at the TV is uncomfortable. Number two, people typically do not have outlets up there. So they've got a lot of work that they have to do to get the TV up there. Rule of thumb for me is center of the TV should be at about 36 inches off of finished floor. Now, that's very difficult to achieve in most homes, and to get rid of all of the cables and to have them set into some sort of credenza below, again, pretty challenging. But we're always shooting for about 36 inches center line off of finished floor. That means when you're sitting in a couch, you can see the TV very comfortably. Anyway, in my bedroom, we have a dresser, and we put a TV in there, and so the TV sits about a foot off the dresser, and so we've got these stupid cables cables that we see, and I've tied them together, but it's like a black line on the wall, and it's ugly. So anyway, I was at Home Depot, and there are these in-wall cable management systems that you can purchase and install very, very simply. So I'd urge you to go to DIY Pete on YouTube. And I looked at his video in preparation for this talk, and he goes through the process of the do-it-yourself at home, buy the kit at Home Depot, and then you're very easily able to put this kit together. So the in-wall cable management system essentially is two cover plates, one that sits directly behind the TV, and the other sits down below the credenza or the dresser, wherever you're going to put all of the equipment. And it's really straightforward. I mean, you're basically cutting some holes in the drywall, you're feeding wires through, and essentially you never see the wires because they're fed through the wall. The only thing you've got to be really careful about is if you've got fire blocking in that wall, you're going to have a challenge getting those wires through that. But you're essentially locating the bays or the studs in the wall, and then you're marking the holes at the top and the bottom and running the cables through. Very, very straightforward, and it gets rid of all of the cables visually. And it's a great solution that just about, when I go to most people's homes like mine, my friends, they have the same issue. They've got cables running there. They hurriedly put their TV up, and they never really thought about them. But there are these super easy kits, very inexpensive, $50, and you can do it yourself at Home Depot from the kit at Home Depot if you're relatively handy. So anyway, there you go.
Sounds good. I need to do it for myself. Okay, so my first tip has to do with a material that I used on my own home, and the way it came about is I will go. I always never want to go, but I end up going to these building conventions. They have them right now in Boston called Build Boston, and there's a huge convention center, and there's lots of classrooms and things that people can take, courses for professionals and on and on. But always in the middle, there's kind of a big area where companies will have their products. They'll have little booths, and that's always free. So you can go there, you get a little bag, and you can walk the halls. Whether you're an architect, a builder, whatever you are, you're really free to sort of go to these things. And I always find them really interesting because, of course, all these companies are trying to promote their new products. And so for me, I go through these booths. I go quickly because, of course, everyone wants to talk to us when they realize you're an architect. Oh, you want windows? And I go,
oh my God.
But there was a company from Nashua, New Hampshire called Light Blocks, and they had things like this just sitting on a table. And I kind of stopped and I said, I picked up all these kind of things and I said, what could that be? And what's neat about it, it's just a raw material. It's translucent blocks of different widths with different colors, with different backings. This one has a yellowy amber to it. That's a little bit reflective because there's a mirror behind it. There's a mirror on the backside. Yeah. And they're just sitting there, and you kind of look at it like you are, Doug, like, what can I do with that? Yeah. What can I do with that? And you see kind of the applications of other architects that take these raw materials because you get them in sheets, 8x4 or whatever 4x4, you can get different sheets, and you sort of wonder, what can I make with this raw material? And I love that because it's not really a product in the sense that it's a window, it's a prefabricated unit. It's just a raw material, and because of so many colors, so many thicknesses, so many reflectivities, look at this cool glass that's sort of laminated with different color inside of it, and awesome. Has different trends. So it's got all this kind of cool potential. And I sit there and I say, can I have some of those? And they say, of course. And they give you a little booklet, and you sort of bring it home, and I just stare at it, and I wonder what it could be. So I had in my own home a stairway that needed some sort of railing. I didn't want a railing. I didn't know what to do there. And in fact, what I did finally was framed a drywall kind of area, then put this one light block material, which is sort of similar to this, although there's no color in it. It's iridescent plastic. And so when I look at it right now, I can sort of see the light pass through it, but when the sun goes through it, it changes colors. Like it looks like an abalone shell. You get greens and purples and blues, and of course it changes all the time. So it's a very cool material. I bought a 4x4 sheet, which was, I don't know, $100. And people think it's like the most magical thing. And I said, it's $100. I just bought this raw material. And I had to find the way to sort of enclose it and put it, into a little kind of frame around it. But basically, very inexpensively, a really cool element. So it's not necessarily going to, in this case, a railing company or buying some expensive stainless steel something that's made for that. Sometimes it's really just about finding a raw material and kind of looking at it and studying it and seeing what it could be, and being a little bit creative and inventing something like that. So I think that's one of my more favorite parts of my home office, where that's where we're shooting this right now, is where I grabbed a kind of cool material I found at one of these big conventions and just trying to find a way to sort of reuse it or use it in a different way. So tip number one for me is find some cool raw materials and let your imagination kind of lead where it can go.
And what did you say the company was that made that?
Light Blocks. Light Blocks. LIGHT blocks.com. And you can actually order little samples. They can send you, a little book of samples, a booklet of samples, and you can just sort of look at the stuff. And, I think that's what they like. I think that they give it to the architects or designers, and so here you go, and you get all this stuff, and you're like,
what could I do? Be?
Yeah.
It's interesting. There's a company called Freeform that makes very similar, right? So we just did a kitchen island and in a basement, looks like a piece of furniture, and we used a piece of that kind of material, an opaque white or semi-opaque white material. Very, very cool. Great stuff.
Great company. Yeah.
So tip number 2 is about barn doors. So I was doing research for a barn door. A project I'm working on right now. We've got a hallway, and in the hallway there's some millwork, and the owner wanted to alter the millwork to be a little bit more functional, and she didn't want to see it during the day before the kids were home. And so we thought about all different kinds of doors that we could do in front of this, and the interior designer that I'm working with said, why don't we do a barn door? If we could do something that's really slick, it's going to be huge, but it could be rolled in front of this millwork and you never see it. And the hallway was wide enough. And she said, the owner said, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. And I thought, oh my gosh, the barn doors that I'm familiar with and the hardware, it's going to be clunky. And so I went and did some research and found a company called Bartels out of Germany. And so we dealt with them in purchasing the barn door hardware, and I'll show you the barn door here in a second. But if you check out Bartels online, very, very cool, really wonderful different kinds of products that are related to any kind of hardware that you could use for doors. So they have swinging door hardware, barn door, pocket door, closet door, sliding door, and then they make hardware for wood barn doors and glass barn doors. So the same kind of hardware you'd be using in a shower, for example, you could also be installing for a barn door in a hallway. So we ended up using this barn door hardware for this door. So the door ended up being quite large, about 7.5 feet tall and probably at least 6 feet wide. Ended up weighing a little less than 400 pounds.
Whoa.
So the hardware that we had to purchase, we'll show here in a second, is really, really, it's super functional, and it ends up holding up the weight of this barn door. I was concerned because you have 2 wheels on this barn door hardware instead of 1, and that's because that's a function of the weight of the door. Actually ends up looking really elegant. The other neat thing that I liked about this barn door hardware, you got to have the right kind of door for it. You can mount the barn door from the very top instead of running a strap down the face of the door, which is pretty typical for barn door hardware. You can actually mount at the top with some very deep screws. So we ended up using, if I recall correctly, 1.75 inch solid door, and then we clad this door in 1/4 inch material on either side. And you'll see on the facade of this, what happened with the interior designer said, I really like this piece of artwork, and it was a really simple, like 2 foot by 3 foot piece of, it looked like somebody had just put together 2 or 3 inch pieces of wood, and it really wasn't that large. But she said, I love this design. Let's do a door that looks something like that. So, I mean, it is a dream project for an architect. So I was able to sit down on a Saturday and probably put together 5 or 6 different versions, and they got more and more complex, of the pattern on the facade of this door, sent them to her. And she was great to work with. Her name's Diana Byrne. And Diana would look at it and say, I like this about this and this about that. And it was great collaboration. So went back and probably ended up doing about 15 or 20 of these designs, and then showed them to the owner, and she got really excited about it. And we made this thing. So the back of the door is just a veneer, one simple veneer, and you see that the door slides from the front of the millwork actually into another opening, which goes into a kid's playroom, and it closes off about half of that opening. So from the kid's playroom, you're just looking at this beautiful oak veneer, but in the hallway, you're looking at this wonderful diagonal design, and it's made up of 2-inch pieces of oak. It's got what's called a Bona finish on it, so it's a clear finish. We might have used a little whitewash in there to get it a little bit lighter, and it's a really wonderful barn door. So, before doing this, I'd never really thought about a barn door having a very minimal or sophisticated look. It's clearly not minimal by the design, but it's very, very contemporary. So, if somebody says, hey, you should do a barn door, you can think about all of the wonderful different kinds of designs you can do on the face, and check out Bartels for your barn door hardware. This stuff is stunning. It's stainless steel, very, very sturdy, and you just have to touch the edge of this door to make it work. So really, really cool product, and the barn door hardware and the idea for a barn door can be pretty cool. So,
what I've noticed is, because I'm doing something like this in a very, very minimal sort of style house in Florida, is that it's so austere. Part of it, one of the spaces is so austere, and it was because the owner wanted that. But then they suddenly felt like they needed something, and that was a barn door, and it was really the hardware. They just wanted to see all those mechanisms, the wheels. There was something about all that, just seeing the thing in motion that they found very attractive, and I thought it was a very good idea. Rather than have, I don't know, relying on something else, we just said, hey, well, why don't we just express how the door works? And they sort of like that idea. And as you said, sometimes this hardware can be very nice to look at, and you see the kind of wheels and how it connects, and just see the slide along, and you just kind of see how it works. And it's sort of low tech, but it's kind of cool to see sometimes. So I get it.
Absolutely.
Good tip. Alrighty, so this is yet another product for me. My second tip has to do with a material called Plyboo. Plyboo, I guess ply comes from plywood. Boo, I have no idea where it comes from, but we're using this in a hotel project, and the reason I like this so much is because, here's one example. This is 3/4 inch plywood, but because of new laser cutting technologies, they were able to route out of the plywood and create these really cool textures. And of course, I've got this book here that has all these amazing, let me just, I'll do a commercial for this company here, but you can get these incredible woven, and I'll have some images there for you, but really incredibly rich textures that you really couldn't make by hand. I mean, you really kind of have to have that laser cutters to really kind of carve out, but basically carving out of plywood to make these incredible patterns that, for us, for this one project, it really is to have a kind of mid-century modern 50s sort of texture, but of course we're doing it in a way that you could have never done before. So I love the idea of recalling a texture or pattern from a previous era, but of course they could have never made it without this neat technology. So it's not, I guess it's expensive, but it's relative because it's plywood. So the material is not terribly expensive, but to get the pattern you want can be expensive.
So it's plywood and bamboo,
like 3/4 inch plywood
and bamboo veneer.
Routed out. No. There are some veneers, but it can just be the plywood. It's different compositions depending upon what colors and materials and also acoustic properties you want. So the Plyboo that we're using for this project, it has a great acoustic property. So, besides all the kind of cool patterns when we light it, it does sort of absorb sound much better than a hardwood or a flat wood would do. So I think, it's amazing because you really have to look at the application and say, look, I want this room to be quiet, but I love having a very vibrant three-dimensional texture. They have that, or you can find that, or you can make it actually, but there are so many options to pick from. I think it's really a function of sort of, what you're looking for. And for me, it was trying to have a mid-century modern aesthetic, have the degree of sound absorption, and just the beautiful kind of three-dimensional. It's not flat. I mean, it really is truly three-dimensional. So you get this really amazing sort of in and out, and then the light and shadow when we light it. It really sort of has sort of fit the bill for this project. So again, it's really kind of using something dumb like plywood, but then applying a kind of new technology, laser technology. I mean, it's relatively recent, in order to create some very intricate three-dimensional patterns. So I think that this is something I would definitely, again, this is one of these things you can find in one of those big conventions where you see all the neat new materials. Or go online and go to plyboo.com. You can really see all the kind of cool routed plywood materials that are out there. Again, it's kind of a raw material in the sense you sort of get this, you kind of go, what could that be? A wall, a ceiling, a partition, a screen. So it's the same sort of thing. It's kind of a neat raw material that you can really, again, it's your imagination, what your imagination can do with this stuff.
So very cool. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm looking at the website. The stuff is freaking gorgeous. But it is, you had said the name in the beginning, Plyboo. The reason it's Plyboo is because it's bamboo veneer plywood. It's not any kind of wood, it's bamboo.
Got it.
So I just wanted to interrupt because I wanted to make sure the audience understood that. This is a stunning material. Yeah. Absolutely beautiful. Holy crap.
I want to use it, but it's expensive. You know what I have to do? As I was an architect, I have to say, hey, I'm using a lot of this at a project. Can you send me a little something? I need a big sample. And I'll put it,
Yeah, a 4-foot sample.
About a 4 foot by 6 foot by, anyway.
Wow, this stuff is beautiful.
Tip 2.
So for my third tip, this is a material that I find fascinating. We first used this in my office, in Joe Moore's office up in Greenwich, probably 8 to 10 years ago. Maybe it was about 8 years ago. The company is called GKD Metal Fabric. So this is not sheet metal with holes in it. This is metal that is an actual fabric. So I read a little bit about GKD's company. They started in Germany, and you know how these businesses all get started. So somebody says, hey, do you have this kind of product? And they say, no, but we can make it. And they created these machines that actually wove metal. I mean, think about that. So there were no images of these machines that I could find, but I'm sure if you Googled it, you could find them. Nothing on their website. So these are flexible woven metal fabrics, and they have so many different uses. So I'll show some images. This is a pretty straightforward. That almost looks like it's sheet metal with hole in it, but as you get more complex, these things are really, really cool. So what you're looking at and what you're hearing about here are, these are stainless steel examples. You can get these in a number of different kinds of metal. Some still have stainless steel bars on the interior for the structural stability. But if you take a look at this, I mean, this is absolutely stunning. These are material samples that they sent me. And you can imagine the applications and the expense of these panels. So this company is now based in Maryland, and they have from what I can tell, a weaving mill that they put these metal fabrics together on. And as I said, they have all different kinds of aesthetic and functional uses. So just some examples. There are images of these metal fabrics in ceilings. You can create graphics with them. You can put them on the facade of a building, of course, safety and security. You can make furniture out of them. We can set them in the floor. There are a number of images with these things with gigantic screens on parking decks to kind of dress up a parking deck. Of course, you can use them for solar management on the exterior of a building. And then they have these two products called Illumesh and Media Mesh. And so on the exterior of stadiums, they have these gigantic metal fabric panels, and then they have LED lights set inside of them. And then you could put whatever kind of image or text on the exterior of these things. So the interesting thing about that is if you just put a giant sign on a building, it's always a giant sign. But if you put this metal mesh as a facade on the exterior of a building, aesthetically, it's quite beautiful. And at night, the whole thing lights up and you can see through it from the interior. So we've used this GKD metal fabric for panels. We did, if I can find an image of this, we've got a mudroom, and it was a contemporary renovation edition. And so there's some traditional elements and some contemporary elements. And the panels on these very large mudroom doors we did in this GKD metal mesh, and then we put actually some fabric behind it so you couldn't see through them. But it looks absolutely stunning right next to all of these traditional moldings. So that was really, really cool. And We've also used it on the facade of buildings in the past, and we're going to use this actually for speaker fabric on the exterior on a terrace. So they have these big speakers and stone walls, and the contractor said, let's just get some sheet metal. I said, no, there's this really cool company that we can get some metal mesh. And there are also lots of interesting ways to attach this to buildings. So as you can imagine, on a huge building, you're going to need some sort of clip system or hooks or frames. So they've kind of solved all of these problems over time in creating this really wonderful material. So it's a fabric, and it's metal, and it's incredibly durable, and it comes in stainless steel. And so this stuff will last forever. But anyway, really, really neat material that I highly recommend, and really beautiful applications.
I can see that material being used in a lot of public applications, like a restaurant or a hotel, given that you don't have the fire issues with, let's say you have a real fabric, right? You could have a metal curtain or something and not have those issues worried about fire ratings and all of that. So that's neat. I like that. I have to look into that. All right, my third tip is I get progressively more boring with the kind of material that I'm picking, but this one actually, I like it because it's so simple and it solves a problem. It solves a problem that I often have. It has to do with bathrooms where, you have a cool tile like this, a simple ceramic tile.
I like that.
And I say, okay, it's kind of Subway, but it's stretched more horizontal, which I think is fun. But let's say you're doing the shower and you come outside and you sort of have the opening to get into the shower, and you're like, oh, now I have to have a bullnose to kind of go around the corner of the wall or something. And I always hate those bullnoses. Suddenly you have this really sleek, rectilinear, orthogonal kind of tile, and then it just has this little ugly little bullnose. And I think, I wish there was a better idea. And there is this neat trim called Butech. You can get it in white, you can get it in chrome, you can get it a dull finish, but whatever finish, it just goes right around the tile like that, really simply. And it's just a clean, perfectly sort of made edge for the tile. So there's no bullnose. It really just kind of goes right into that tile, which I think is just such a really nice idea, really clean, really simple, perfectly sort of made just for this tile. And then they also have a corresponding base material of different dimensions, but like this then can be the base of the floor, not inside the shower, but outside. Let's say the bathroom, you have this kind of frame opening to get into the shower with this tile on the inside. You've got this great frame. This one is a sort of shinier, I think this is a polished chrome that sort of surrounds or frames the opening. And then at the base, you have this material, which is, I think it's a couple, 3 inches, I guess, or 2.5 inches, that sort of works with that base to kind of unify that space. And what's cool about this material, it's from Butech, B-U-T-E-C-H. What's neat about this is that the corner is an integral corner, meaning they fabricate a corner, which is not like two pieces which butt together. They make a corner piece. So that's one piece. You don't have the problem where the thing pulls apart, but basically they make a corner piece. Of course, I don't have it, but they make a corner piece, which is a piece that you just put right around the corner. Then you sort of connect to the sort of straight pieces. So you have a really clean corner. You have really nice clean edges to sort of capture the tile, and you've got this really nice base. So you can have a really unified composition in a bathroom of a base with a perfect corner going up and around with this sort of slim profile, and it all looks real unified. It's real clean. It's very functional. It's great in terms of having a good look, but also just having a very functional kind of thing where you don't have the water leaking out, or it's just a very clean and organized way to handle a situation like that. So I love this material because, and we're doing it right now for this bathroom project, because it just takes, for me, a kind of a niggling little thing where, this tile doesn't really want to have a bullnose. It just doesn't seem like it wants that. So it provides a kind of really nice, perfectly fitting finish. And in this application, I think it's great. So this is a neat material that I found not too long ago, and I'm excited to use it for this bathroom project.
So I'll add that there's a company called Schluter, and Schluter makes those edges. We use them a lot for exactly that purpose. So because you can't find a bullnose in a tile, we'll use a Schluter edge, or we'll use that Schluter edge at the edges of mirrors, for example. If we've got a mirror that we're applying to a wall and we want to put a nice edge on it. Looks like Butech works with Porcelanosa.
That's right.
So
that's right.
You're familiar with that company. I guess you work with their products a lot, and that's probably why you're familiar with Butech.
Yeah, it's interesting. This should be a topic for another time. But the interface between two dissimilar materials, is always a kind of challenge, and it's often a functional issue. It's often a chance to celebrate a kind of a condition. It's often, let's say, floor and wall. Wood floor meets a drywall wall. Let's say, or painted drywall. Well, people put a base there, or not. I mean, there's so many different ways to handle this, but the issue is you have to handle it. And so for us, it's the tile meeting, let's say, the drywall. You've got a wet condition with this sort of ceramic meeting a drywall, and how are you going to handle that issue? It's more complicated because of the water. But every time there's this kind of meeting of two different materials, two different conditions. I mean, this for us, I think in a way is kind of a test of an architect, right? It's like, how are you going to handle that condition? How are you going to handle this, the meeting of, the window opening and the outside or the sill? Like, how are you going to handle that condition? Or how are you going to handle the threshold between one room to the other? So I think I always get really interested in those areas, which obviously needs more work in a way. It needs being more clever or innovative often. And I often, when I'm looking at other architects' work, I kind of look at those places, like how do they handle those transitions? And if they handle them well, you kind of go, this guy or this girl knows what they're doing. So I always look to those kind of those interface conditions, I call them.
Absolutely. Yeah, we should definitely talk about that. I mean, we could probably do a show on just baseboards alone and what you end up doing
exactly right.
at the base condition. Yeah.
Hey, so in the middle of this podcast, you had talked about an interior designer you work with, and yes. I got really interested in that. I think that maybe in the future we should consider having somebody. We should talk to somebody, because people wonder about that, where interior designer sort of starts or stops and architect begins, or can they work together, or do we do all of it, or can we do all of it? And I think there's no easy answer, but I think maybe to hear it from a good interior designer firsthand might be fun to go back and forth with.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think
I don't have
great
great
to talk
experience
to.
with them.
Yeah.
I have not had great experiences, but it sounds like you've had some good experiences. So.
Yeah, absolutely. They're all different, and you're right. It changes. The relationship is different with every single one of them.
Right. So we should talk about that.
Sounds good.
Okay, so there's no questions this week, Doug, because our topic was a little offbeat. So you have any parting?
No, I'm ready to wrap it up. So you've been watching or listening to Design Your Dream Home with Doug and Steve. Thanks for joining us, and we'd love to hear your thoughts. So shoot us an email. Love to hear from you, and we'll see you next time.